Welcome back to Awakened Exchanges. I'm your host, Jay Rich, and we've got another special episode for you today. Would you believe it? I actually got to record this intro a whole day earlier this week. It's only Tuesday. That said, it's still not a whole lot of time to get this edited and out there, but at least I'm not sweating bullets to do it this week. This is our special Halloween episode, and I truly hope you get some fun information as well as just a little pick-me-up as we get closer to the holiday season. We do have special Thanksgiving and Christmas episodes on the way as well, but I'm going to keep them mostly secret for now. As we get a little closer to recording them, I hope to tease a little more information. I just don't want to disappoint anyone if either of them doesn't come through. Before we get into this week's interview, once again, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, but we all need to get out there and vote. We're all Americans and we deserve to have our voices heard. If your side doesn't win, then maybe we should stop thinking of it as a competition and start thinking of it as cleaning up this cesspool of corruption. If you want America to survive, we have a lot of work to do. As of this episode going live, we'll only have 5 days left before the great non-decision of 2020. Still, you have to let your voice be heard. Yesterday, America just got their third Supreme Court justice that was nominated by Donald Trump. That's 3 people, and at least 2 of them could be considered the most controversial nominations in Supreme Court history. And now they're in that position for life. RBG would be rolling in her grave at the Republican Party's audacity, telling America that 10 months was not enough to approve a nomination for Obama in an election year, but 5 weeks was plenty of time to confirm yet another Republican nominee from the most controversial president in our nation's history. We may not even be able to fix the damage that has been done to our country over these last 4 years, but if we're going to give it a try, then it's vital that you speak up and let yourself be heard. I understand that half of you love what the Republicans have done, but if you ask yourself the question, is it fair? You'd be hard-pressed to give a logical reason as to why you believe it to be so. I know that we're programmed to win, and it seems like it's win at all costs, but you have to ask yourselves, why? What are we playing for? Who are you playing against? Why do we let both sides of the aisle pit us against one another instead of doing what's best for all of us? And do you really think that no one born after 1962 has good ideas? The average age of the members of the House of Congress is 57.8 at the start of this session. The senators were even older at 61.8 years old. Donald Trump was already the oldest inaugurated president when he was 70, and now we're going to get him at 74, or Biden at 78? What happened to JFK leading us towards a bold new future when he was 43 years old? JFK was 25 when Biden was born, and frankly, I'd rather have him now at 103 years old than either one of these true dinosaurs. Can we get back to some youth in our politics? Teddy Roosevelt was 42 when he succeeded Kinley, and he's responsible for our national park system. At least Obama was only 47. Are we trying to go back in time? Do you honestly think America was a better place in our past? We've been slowly progressing, getting a little more equal and a little more inclusive, yet somehow people want to go back and erase the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Were things really better when we had separate drinking fountains, or when our children were segregated for their education? Where is this great America that we're getting back to? Would you please point it out to me so I know what we're working towards? Right now, it just seems to me that we're trying to leap back into a time most of us wouldn't even recognize. Have I alienated enough people already? Probably, so I guess I should move on. Before we get into the sponsors, I wanted to thank Elwin Herman for giving this wonderful interview. Her group, Seekers of the Stone, which meet at the Sacred Spiral Sanctuary in Ethel, Washington, include a diverse group of people, including our former guest, Sean Shumway. They're busy in preparation for the Samhain, or Samhain, or Halloween, whatever you want to call it, but their Samhain celebration, but she graciously made time for us this week. I hope that you find this conversation as fascinating as I did. Maybe in her next interview we can get more into the psychic phenomena and Edgar Cayce readings. Please forgive the clocks and a couple of animal interruptions. I think they're mostly minimized. Now, here's a brief rundown of our sponsors. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you personally for your support. Just listening and sharing this podcast with your friends gives me a reason to keep striving to provide the best content that I can. If you have the means and would like to contribute personally, please don't forget about our Patreon page. There you can get access to exclusive content and deals just for our dedicated fans. As for the other sponsors, Awakened Vapes was the first of the Awakened brands and has been helping you modulate your high with CBD-only, high-terpene vape products since 2019. Genesis Pharms has been making the highest quality medicinal RSO among many other amazing products, starting with the medical community back before 2010. And last but not least, the Caramel Corn Company, bringing you caramel corn the way it was meant to be. And remember, if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Also, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I know that every podcast says that, but that's really because it does help spread the visibility. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. All right, now, stay tuned, and thank you for listening to Awakened Exchanges. Genesis Pharms was founded on the belief in cannabis's ability to heal. Genesis Pharms is more than a brand. They're a compassionate community of like-minded folks that generate top-quality cannabis products made with love and care. Community outreach is always on their mind, and their partnerships with Grow for Vets and Parents for Pot was just a beginning to what they hope to accomplish in the coming years. You can find their products on the best dispensary shelves across the state of Oregon. Their RSO is the most consistent quality in the state, their tinctures are second to none, and their personal massage oil will have you and your partner both coming back for more. Find them on Facebook, Instagram, and ask for them in your local dispensary today. Don't forget to listen to Sean's interview right here on Awakened Exchanges soon. Our new sponsor is the Caramel Corn Company. Caramel corn the way it was meant to be. Made from premium ingredients in small, handcrafted batches, and completely gluten-free. The flavors include original, roasted cashew, salted almond, mixed nut, white morsel macadamia, spicy sriracha, peanut butter, butterscotch, and my personal favorites, raspberry caramel apple and chocolate drizzle. I can't say enough how delicious this caramel corn is. I wouldn't buy it from any other source. You can find Caramel Corn Company products for sale at Portland area Market of Choice locations, and when it gets stocked back up, maybe it'll be online again. Visit www.caramelcorncompany.com and get more information today. Remember, buying local supports small businesses and keeps your money building your community. Last but not least, Awakened Vapes has been bringing you some of the highest quality CBD vape pens since ringing in the new year of 2019. I became passionate about cannabis after a car wreck left me with major migraines, and no modern medical pills helped alleviate the symptoms. After having tried cannabis a handful of times in high school and college, it was actually a doctor's recommendation that led me to give it another try. Only then did I realize that we'd all been at least a little misled about the health benefits of this amazing plant. And despite an unexpected break because of the vape ban and then a global health crisis, the business is stronger than ever, and we invite you to check out our updated website today. We are still offering our 3 varieties with new and improved terpene formulations for enhanced flavor to go along with that custom blended terpene effect. Check back at www.awakenedvapes.com and be the first online orders of our high-demand Delta 8 cartridges coming in stock here soon. Use the coupon code PODCAST20 at checkout all this month for 20% off your entire order. That's PODCAST20 for 20% off. Welcome to Awakened Exchanges, and for those in our audience who are unfamiliar with you, would you mind telling us your name and a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, one thing I want to say is I'm really happy to be here today.
We're really happy to have you too.
Thank you so much. My name is Elwin Herman, and I am the High Priestess of Seekers of the Stones, and that is a pagan group, and I use the word pagan because it's a larger community word. So I practice core magic and have done this with this particular group for 18 years, but I have been working within the spectrum for 35.
Wow. So how did you first get involved with the pagan community?
Well, I think it kind of got involved with me, actually. I was born with just being able to see all these different dimensional spaces around me, and I've always been able to see ghosts and entities and all of these things. Energy moves at different speeds.
Absolutely.
And so I guess I've just wired to be able to see things that move a little faster than what most people are able to see.
Interesting. That's an interesting perspective on how that could come about. Because we don't really know what that residual energy is, but it's still hanging around. At least it seems to be.
Oh, absolutely. I also, as I went forward, I'm an empath and a intuitive reader and a psychic medium, which those kind of all go together, but they're different, all in the same. And so as I got older and I would talk to people and I would start telling them about themselves, they would get really freaked out. I wasn't aware that not everyone could do this or see these things until I was told that. So at that point, and because I felt so deeply of people's pains, I eventually had to learn how to really dial that down to be able to live in the world that we live in now with so much energy, so much thought and emotion that is swirling around.
Do you find that's why you prefer a little bit more out in the country? It's not as busy thoughts and everybody else around?
I think I do now. When I was younger, I loved being in the middle of everything.
Really?
It was great. It was like all this energy was there. And it was like, because I see energy, especially with people and emotion, I see it with color and almost like art pieces. So everybody is a different masterpiece that they've created themselves. And so in that way, it was really exciting. But people's pain have become more. Okay. And the color of their pain has become different. And so for me, having a bit of time to isolate allows me to really be present with people when I do have that opportunity to work with them.
Oh, okay. My first thought was just the overwhelming nature of getting all of this extra information in there. But you getting to see it from that perspective, that's interesting. You get to see more of their whole being, I guess.
Yeah, and each person carries that, and it's not just the spectrum of their energetic being, their present incarnation, but often their incarnation all the way back to their 0 point.
Wow!
And so it's like these mini stories and mini books that whisper throughout the essence of the individual.
So could you tell us a little bit about the differences between like a medium and the other psychic things you were talking about?
Okay. Well, a medium speaks to people that have died.
Okay.
So you could be a psychic and be able to feel and connect with the energy of the emotions.
Okay.
Or the memories, which, look, memories are emotions, right, of individuals, but not be able to speak or connect with the dead. And so that's something that I've always been able to do. Because for me, the dead and entities were all just different shadows or consistencies or depths, per se, of what existed within this realm that we currently reside in.
So as we're nearing Halloween at this point, I know that you have a celebration coming up. Is it on this Saturday, actually on Halloween? Yes,
and I'm really excited. You know, we have a double full moons, which this makes the second full moon is called a blue moon.
Absolutely. And so, a Halloween blue moon. That's pretty
Halloween yes. And it looks like that it's going to be beautiful, and to be able to be in the Pacific Northwest and have it outside with the fire going underneath, hopefully the moonlight, it's going to be just so fabulous because that's all that extra energy that's going to be there. So it's like the best of the best, because often people's lives. If it's on Wednesday, you can't let's take Wednesday off and make it a holiday. I mean, to me, I think that's great, but for most people, that's not where they live in this world. So to have it on a day that the energy is really great, and it's the beginning of it. It actually doesn't end until around the 7th of November. But it's where, you have so much of that energy there, and you can really speak to the ancestors, and the veil is the thinnest. But we'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes.
Okay. So the Saturday, you've got the big celebration planned, but the energy, you said, goes through the 7th?
Goes through the 7th.
And what is that exactly? What energy?
Well, we say that the veil is the thinnest. If you can imagine material in front of you, and on the 31st, or right around there, if you think about cheesecloth and the consistency of that, you can see through, things can move through. It would take a little bit more, just like when you strain things out.
Yeah.
The liquid goes through really well. And then on the 7th, it just gets sheerer and sheerer till the 7th, and that it all has to do with how all of the astrologically how everything lines up. So at that point, it's like the sheerest material. You can look right through it. And so through that whole process, though, we say the veil is thin. And so we can see it, because generally it's more like a cotton material. So you can't really, there's a distinct difference between our world and the world of the dead. And so now it's just thinner and thinner. But one thing that's interesting is this year, generally it doesn't start until I usually notice it more mid-October, and then it starts thickening up again through mid-November. This year it started last month. So all the ancestors, and I'm sure a lot of people have felt a lot more presence now. They've just come in and sat for a while. I think, they know that something is happening. There's a big shift that's going to be happening, and they're coming in. They're sitting down for the long haul, so it's going to be interesting.
I was wondering about that, with how much has gone on this year with 2020. Just wow. There's no way to really describe it, but now we've got literally a once in a blue moon, Halloween, and all of this other stuff. And you said it's just been getting thinner and thinner already. Yeah,
it's been really thin already. We are more like at a point of, it's already that sheer see-through for the last month. We've already been there. So there has been no barriers, really. Everything's been coming through, going back and forth. So it's very interesting. But a lot of things are just hanging around, where they normally just come and visit for a short period of time and then leave. They're like taking up residence. I need a bigger house.
Well, has there been anything particularly intriguing that's shown up for you in this last month?
Just a lot more conversations about the future, things that may be happening, the shifting, the changes that I can do. Really a little more pressure to help people awaken, to make them aware of the consciousness that surrounds them, the energy that they hold in, to see themselves as energetic beings, opposed to being this space of I'm not powerful, to get themselves out of the mundane into the true vision of get out of the matrix, okay? Let's get to this place here. And that's been a big press of really saying, you got to hear some, keep talking.
People have been talking about the red pill for a while, all the people waking up, and I think there's still a majority of people in this country who are stuck in the red versus blue as far as political spectrums, that they're tied up in that physical world and haven't been looking at the rest of it. So it'd be interesting if we had a majority of people starting to wake up and see what kind of changes those could bring too.
Oh, I think that's pivotal for our future. It is a difference between having one or not. And I really think that's heavy. And I've been getting visions for probably 25 years now, along with a lot of other people that follow the same path all over the world. And in the beginning, I didn't share a lot of this. It's like, hey, let's have this conversation of how the world's going to end. Or, so it's not a common conversation you have. But when I did start sharing it, other people started sharing it with me. And it's so common. And all of these things are the same. So it can only be a fluke if 1 or 2 people have similar dreams. But when thousands of people have similar dreams and the changes within them, then you pay attention.
So one of my biggest things with astrology and energy is that it's not like the astrology, if you're looking at your chart, it's going to tell you exactly what's going to happen when. It's telling you what energy you have to work with, right?
Yeah. And well, that's one of my biggest complaints. I'm like, well, I really appreciate, the divine, wherever you see that energy, the gods, ancestors, whoever we're having a conversation with. Thank you so much for that insight. Could we give me a little more detail? Instead of saying, oh, look, the sky is falling. I don't know what day or time, but it's going to fall at some point. Thank you. That's, I think people need to have a bit more information. I think the biggest thing is I have a series called the 9 Steps of the Awakened, and I try to teach people with 9 classes how to become to that state. Because I try to think of what are the 9 things that people really need to have that's crucial for them to come to the point of being awakened. And so I put together some things. Each one is about 2 hours, and we go through it. But there are several possibilities of what the future can look like. And there is nothing set in stone, because each day, intentionally, we make the choice of what we're going to do. And if people make the intentional choice to be aware of what is going on around them, not just in their own personal lives, but the world at large, and see themselves not as an individual, but a collectiveness of human beings, that's important. Now, that doesn't mean you lose your individuality. You absolutely have that. But see that you're part of something more than just you. I guess that might be more important. I think the more of us that do that, we can change it towards a more positive future for ourselves. And again, on a future podcast, we can get in a lot of details of what I'm kind of seeing with both of those things as well.
My scientific mind always liked the idea of branchial time. We're at this point right now that's the present, but everything else has possible futures where different decisions lead to all those different branches of those different timelines. But everybody is making those decisions and helping edge us into different branches of time.
Absolutely. That's again another podcast. I love quantum physics. I love the idea of science, spirituality, these points of possibilities and what that looks like in every person's life. And I think whenever you bring it down to a small point, when people realize this point of time and how they can choose it, they can choose their future. They're no longer a victim of their present or their past. They create their lives. They create that. No one is creating it for them.
They don't have to get stuck in those patterns.
They don't. They can release those patterns, break free of what was, and create what they want. And often people walk around not even knowing what patterns they have, and they continually redo them over and over and over again. And so it's really powerful. Move away from your patterns, your programmings. Open up, awaken to the true essence of why you're here. And it's not here to repeat patterns. We are here to be emotional beings, but through that process, we experience life on many different conscious states, and that allows us to move forward. But you and I, have that opportunity to choose what our future looks like. And each of us have that responsibility going forward.
Because we're not just choosing for ourselves at this point.
We're choosing for all humanity. And I want to really emphasize that. All of you that are out there that are thinking, well, this is too hard to have a daily meditation or a daily practice or whatever that might be, the consequences to not being aware, an aware person, is grave and much more than the inconvenience of carving out 30 minutes for yourself every day. It is the difference between a bleak possibility of a history of repeating this future of obliviation, because we will not survive if we don't change. We're at this tipping point of humanity that if we don't move forward and we stay in the constructs of the mind frame that we have, such as this aspect of power and control and all of that, it will lead us down a very dark path. So light bringers, bring it up. Shine a little light on it.
And there's so many people who resist change and are stuck in those ways or think that things are inevitable. So what good can I do? Yeah. And it really is those incremental changes in your own life spread out and ripple throughout the rest of the energetic field.
Absolutely, because if you throw a pebble in a water, it just doesn't fall. It makes ripples and it goes out into more. And so anything you can say to someone, for instance, if you go to the grocery store and you see somebody that looks sad and says, "Oh, I love your shirt today," you don't know how that little bit of kindness can shift their whole mental state. So kindness and words and all these things have power. So utilize that, because that's something you can do every day. Whether if you're talking to yourself, be positive. Be straight and forward with the changes that need to be made. We don't want to whitewash anything in that way to make it different and to hide the stains of who we are or what we have been. But those aren't really stains. They're that beautiful aspect of character that we've created from the choices that we've made that now can lead us to better ones.
And our words are so important. People think that little white lies or just, that's nothing, right? But those little things do affect everybody else. And
it does.
Keeping that in mind and trying to really show that with your actions, I think would be very helpful for everybody.
Yeah, I've never met anyone that appreciated having somebody telling them that, like, I care about you, and then finding out they were just empty words.
Absolutely.
A lie is a lie is a lie, being it very great and grand or very small. That needs to just leave. I mean, there are tactful ways to say things to people and ways to be kind.
You can choose your words to still be kind,
yes,
without having to lie.
Exactly. And that's really important. So I think going forward, I know that we wanted this focus, even though this is great conversation.
Yes,
I look forward to it. And I know it's a passion that we both have, so it's great. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Samhain, which is coming up on Saturday. And
you want to tell them the name versus Halloween and how any of that came about?
Oh, absolutely. So it is. This originally started in Celtic Ireland, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But it's pronounced Samhain. Some people call Samhain, but the correct pronunciation is Samhain. And it started about 2,000 years ago.
Okay. And
they saw it as a vision of light and dark. And so the festival of Samhain marked, of course, the end of the Celtic New Year and the beginning of a new one. And as such can be seen as equivalent of New Year's Eve. So in my tradition, core magic, we see that as that. So of course, that doesn't mean that we can't follow around with mundanes and enjoy it also on the end of December, but we see it as a more deeper spiritual aspect of what are we going to start. So we see that as the end of the year. We have seen how the Celts believed that night preceded day, and so the festivities took place on the eve of Samhain most of the time. Now that was on October 31st. There's no doubt that, and this festival was most important of the 4 Celtic festivals. Samhain was a crucial time of the year loaded with symbolic significance for the pre-Christian Irish. That's a big thing. And I'll talk a bit about that in a minute, because when I went to Ireland, very interesting correlations there. The celebrations, and I'm going to say my pronunciation on some of the Irish or Gaelic words are probably going to just be butchered, so I apologize.
We're trying.
You're right. Is a Taoiseach may have had their origins in the fertility rite on the hill, but it gathered to itself a corpus of other beliefs which crystallized into a great fire festival. So the perceivable and apparent decline of the strength of the sun at this time of the year was a source of anxiety for early man, and the lighting of winter fires here symbolized man's attempt to assist the sun on its journey across the skies. Fire was an earthly counterpart to the sun, and is powerful and an appropriate symbol to express man's helplessness in the face of the overwhelming sense of the decay of the decay of nature as winter sets in. And that's a big visualization. So the sun gets less, and so as that, it gets colder, there's lots of things dying, so you have to have that bit of fire, because light was really crucial during that time. We didn't have electricity, just turn it on. At that time, being able to see, to function, and do things, that was, there was a lot more predators and things in the dark.
As well as just the warmth of that and trying to keep that going for your families and everything, I would assume.
Absolutely. So now the sun is descended into the realm of the underworld. The forces of the underworld they were ascending upwards. The Lord of the underworld, unfettered from the control of the sun, now walked the earth, and with him traveled all of those other creatures from the abode of the dead. Ghosts and fairies and a host of other nondescript creatures went with him. The Lord of the dead in the Celtic mythology can be identified as dawn. Okay, so it's not what you thought I was going to say, right?
No.
And so I kind of, now I have to say personally, I work with the Fae all the time, so I don't see them as dark creatures at all. I know a lot of people do, and that's okay. Everybody has their opinions and how they work with it, and that's okay. So, and I'll tell you a little bit about the background of Dawn as well. So, mythology tells us when the invaders of Ireland, known as the Milesians, landed at the Boyd, they made their way to Tara. Once there, they were advised by the Druids that they should return to their ships and sail off to the shore and to the length of the 9 waves. When they were on the sea, a great storm arose that scattered their fleet. The commander was one of the ships was Don. His ships was broken into pieces in the storm, and he himself drowned along with 24 of his comrades. He was buried on the Skillen Islands off the coast of Kerry. He was the first of the new wave of invaders to meet his death in Ireland, and as such, he became elevated to the status of the god of the dead. The place of his burial became known as Tech Don, the House of Don, and soon became identified with the other world. The Celts were fascinating by tracing their ancestry back as far as they could, and often they identified to be themselves as the earliest ancestors with the gods of those people. Hence, the belief arose that when they died, they went to the house of their ancestors and the god of the underworld. Very different than the Christian beliefs, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this was not necessarily a bad place to go, It's not like, hell and brimstone and the eternal suffering. It's just a different place. So it's an interesting to note that the abode of Dawn on the Skelling Islands is just a few miles from the traditional home of Bong Ruth in the Valetian Islands. As well as being geographically neighbors, both are closely associated with Samhain. And it can be said that Monruth, as a sun god, was at the realm of the underworld and the abode of dawn. So the sun and the dark, they're just a few miles away. So that's kind of interesting how that happened. So that's a little bit about him. And so whenever the Celts kind of saw that as that aspect. So I want to talk a little bit about coming more forward with it.
Okay.
So Samhain is the Feast of the Dead, can now be clearly seen as incorporating the cult of dawn into its celebrations. But how did they do this? Somewhat it remains unknown. The fires were in the likelihood in all honor of the sun god. So we have the fires for the sun god manifesting as the Mang Ruth, but in certain others of the trappings are clearly associated with the Lord of Dead. So the idea that Samhain is a juncture between the two halves of the year, the light and the dark, you see how that kind of correlates now? Saw it acquiring the unique status of being suspended in time, because there's that moment that it's just the energy pauses and holds, and it's like being suspended in this place and in this moment and in this time, and it's like you can take a breath and there's total silence around you, and the energy is just very still, and you can see everything clearly. It's really fabulous. But during this night, the natural order of life was thrown into chaos, and the earthly world of the living became hopelessly entangled in the world of the dead. So everybody, all of them would come up at that point. But the world of the dead was itself a complicated place, a people not only by the spirits of the departed, but also of the host of gods, fairies, and other creatures that we talked about before. So what would happen is they would leave their house, and when they tried never to be on the road after dark. But what they did is that's when they would start carving the turnips or things like that. So they would say, oh, look, here's something, let's go get that. They're like decoys, right? So all of these pumpkins and stuff that are seen here that we utilize.
Interesting.
They're seen as decoys. They're out there. And then they would also put masks on if they had to go out. So they weren't seen as themselves, but something else. So that way they would be seen as ghosts, right?
So that's how we actually get the costumes as well as the jack-o'-lantern kind of habits we have today. Right. So those were some of the things that were there. Now, and that was the outside. This is outside of the house. But inside of the house, people honored their ancestors. It was really important to honor your ancestors. So they would have ancestor altars, always make food for them. Of course, ancestor altars of that time would look very different than what we have now. It may just have been some of their favorite food and some of their favorite objects that maybe were kept after somebody died. And the ones we have now are much more elaborate. You've got candles, you've got pictures, you've got all sorts of things all over the place, and layers of colors and poetry and so many things that you can create in the altars. So it was very different then. But so when you were inside the house, you were considered safe. And so you would celebrate with your ancestors. But outside, the outside was considered then the place of the dead. The malevolent spirits per se. And so that's how we've kind of carried it over here. We still celebrate it, and Halloween then now as a place where we dress up and people give out candy and all of that. Well, people would go to their homes and have food and have special treats at that point. So it kind of evolved in a different way. In America, and I think that's more across the world. Of course, there are many different traditions of other countries that follow, like the Dia de Muertos. Yes, absolutely.
And that's, again, celebrating the dead. And people would dress up to honor the dead. But it was a little different context and meaning behind it. and their culture. And there, we used to, let's see, up to the 60s or 70s, going to graveyards and decorating and having food and taking it there. That's something we often saw in the United States as well.
It's interesting. When I was growing up, my parents, I think, were the last of that generation that we used to go to the graveyards and we would wander around and look through the headstones and things like that and pay homage to the people who came before as well. We actually went back to West Virginia at one point and looking for family trees and going through all that kind of ancestor stuff. And I've always found it weird that people get so creeped out by cemeteries because it's just been a part of my life as well. It was just like, it's just history.
It is. It's history. And I love cemeteries. I mean, my family and a lot of my friends, we would just go, we go to cemeteries. I go to a new town and I go check out the cemetery first. Okay, which one is the oldest? What I'm going to find? And it was something I really enjoyed doing everywhere in the Americas here in the United States. Also in South America, different places I've been. I've always tried to see what their interpretation of it is, and it's that in itself is a beautiful conversation to have. But then when I went to Ireland a few years ago, some of the graves there are so old. It was like it far exceeded anything, of course, I found here, and so I was like, well, everything now is going to be pale compared to this, that I saw, and so it was very interesting, and one of the things I had wanted to talk about is when I did go to Ireland, we liked getting in the car and just kind of driving on the back roads.
Yeah.
We'd have places where we would go that we wanted to see.
The destination points.
Right. So we just go to places, and just like we do here, where are we going to end up? We don't know. So we stopped at this little town off the beaten path, and I noticed they had an art show going in one of the local churches there.
Okay.
Well, I think there was only one church, honestly. So I wandered in with my husband. And I noticed a couple of things. They had, of course, it was all stone floors, and they had places where people had been buried that were still there. So it was that old. They have often people that had been ministers, or so forth through there that were buried in the church. So in that way.
Not something you see over here very often.
No, not something you see very often at all. But when I went through, they had this whole thing about empowered women goddesses. And these big paintings all through there. And I was sitting there looking at it, and I love art. So I was looking at the emotional element of color they used and what it was portraying. And I'm sitting there having this conversation with a couple of these portraits with this other lady that was there. And I said, I love this, and I was so surprised because you have this powerful goddess energy within the church.
Yeah. And
so I found out she was the actual artist, and that was really fun to have that. But she said actually they incorporated a lot of the old traditions in with the new ones, like. For instance, in bulk is another thing that we practice, and that is right around February the 2nd.
Okay. And
so they have a different name for it, but they actually take the fire and they bring it into the church and light the fire there. And then this was all about candles and bringing the light in. So all these things, these traditions have been very well woven into Christianity. And the church is there. And I found that really fascinating.
That is. Slightly related, I just went to the Genghis Khan exhibit over at OMSI. Mm-hmm. And he was able to unite those tribes by doing the same thing and incorporating those beliefs into the structure as opposed to trying to eradicate those beliefs. And so it's interesting how much has been absorbed into Christianity and we just assume was Christian-based before.
Oh, absolutely. And that's I think a lot of that has to do, of course, with religion. So how can I incorporate something of the old traditions into the new and then give it a new name? And that way they'll stop thinking of it as what it was and start thinking about what we are saying. It's another way of, another agenda. What is it that their agenda was?
Obscuring that past a little bit.
Exactly. And so that was certainly done also, with Samhain, because a couple of days later it's All Saints' Day.
Yes.
Which is talking about the different saints and the ancestors and all of that. And a lot of it incorporates that. But unfortunately, in the United States, look, people like candy. Okay, they like dressing up.
Yes, they do.
You're going to have a lose-lose on that part. So here we really enjoy incorporating a lot of the fun aspects of Halloween in it. But for us, we see it as very much a sacred day. It's one for us to really remember our ancestors. And for me, it's a big emphasis. The weaving of the magic, and the magic is energy. Magic and science, they all go together because we're all talking about energy, how we create.
Different languages for the same thing.
Exactly.
Trying to explain it in ways that get across to everybody.
Exactly. And I think eventually this will come more to the exact language of what is being done. But as we celebrate that and we honor our dead, some of the traditions that I do is I have a ancestor roll call. And so I want you to imagine for a moment that it's all dark in the room. And everybody has a list of their ancestors, maybe from one of the Ancestor.com list. Now, a lot of these people you may not know, but you're going to start calling their names, and it'll just be this big process. You keep saying it and keep saying it and keep saying it, one name after another and after another. And you may have 30 people all starting and doing it that same way and weaving that in. And at the end, the last person is done, then they blow out their candle, because there was a candle lit when you started. And then as it goes back through everybody, that silence starts. And till you get to that last person that began. And then it's this moment of silence. But all of those names have been called. It's beautiful to feel the energy of that moment. And we do that because I have a belief of death. I believe there's 3 different deaths.
I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, the first is when you realize that everything's die. And that could be because maybe your grandparents died or your beloved animal, whatever that might be. The second death is when you die. Your body is no longer here. But the third and the final death is when you are not remembered. Then you cease to exist forever. So as long as you have people call your name and remember and tell stories of who you were, good and bad, let's not make it all good, because we learn best from the mistakes that others have made, and especially ourselves.
At least we hope we learn from them.
We hope, yes, absolutely. We hope we learn from them. So we call these names out so people will never be forgotten. And it's important, I think, to do that, because all of us are a creation of thousands of loves, and you are the ultimate product of that. So even though you might not know all those people before you, they're with you. They're part of you. And you are giving a few moments to honor them. It's a beautiful ritual.
Sounds like it.
Yes. And so my Samhain is very much focused on that. We always do intuitive work. And we have various readers that do that. Often I'll have conversations with Hecate, which is a goddess, because I channel her really well. And she often comes in and talks. This year I'm just doing, because I felt so strongly with the spirit presence being here and being here like they are this year, I'm just going to do a psychic medium sort of talking to your ancestors, conversations with your ancestors at the end. And another aspect we do is we toast our ancestors. Now, it's not all of them, but for instance, we can do 3 rounds. Sometimes it's less. The more people you have, the less rounds you have, But we try to limit to 2-3 minutes. And so you will toast perhaps somebody that died recently or somebody you really cared about. And you have a couple of minutes to tell their story. And then at the end, everybody hails them or toasts them, takes a little drink to them. And it goes around in this whole circle. And it's beautiful. It's this in-depth, beautiful closeness that often you were strangers when you came in.
Yeah.
But at the end, you've shared intimate details about your pain. And there's something about pain bringing people together.
Being able to be vulnerable. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, just feel others.
Yeah. And then we share a beautiful dinner together, and we always have a place set for the ancestors, a place for the dead. And then one other thing that I do is I have the rolls of the deads, and I'm going to be actually asking people for names for that. But the dead rolls are people that have died this year, but I'm incorporating it back to last year as well. So I'll ring a bell, and it'll be dark in the room except for me holding my candle, and I will ring, and I will say each of those names. So the newly dead are remembered again in a very powerful way.
It's very beautiful.
It is. I love, this is one of my favorite holidays because it is like a family reunion, and it's about being vulnerable and about the powerful state of love.
And I imagine your ability to help others during this time is actually probably greatly increased, their openness to it, as well as just the fact that the veil is so thin.
Well, I think the veil pretty much non-exists for me all the time. So
congratulations.
That has good and bad things there with it. I mean, honestly, it's not always the best thing. Like whenever I go on vacation to haunted places, I'm going, these are my available times for conversation. If you wake me up at nighttime, this will not be good for you. So I've had to wake up and said, I am on vacation, leave me alone, talk to me in the morning. So, because look, people are just there. It's not like spirits aren't there during the daytime. There's just more busyness. So I try to make myself available when it's convenient for me during those times. But
set boundaries.
Setting boundaries are super important, or it will be overtaken. Years ago, before I learned to really dial myself in, I would have, people coming all the time. And it was really scary in the beginning. You'd have people that, however they died, if it was in a car accident or whatever, all around you. And they're fearful. And you're fearful, and you're trying to figure out what it is they need. And so I did it. I have a little saying that I do out-of-body therapy sessions. So they're out of body, but I'm doing therapy with them to help them kind of move on, to find their own peace. That transition is really important. Being here is not where they need to be. They need to move on.
So the ones that stick around too long, is there a way to help them move forward?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I do house clearings, space clearings. I deal with all sorts of things that go bump in the night. Sometimes it's a nice little bump, and other times they're throwing things across the room. But yes, I can deal with all of those things. And whenever you sometimes have to let people know what happened, or sometimes they've lost their jump point and they don't know how to get out. Often people don't even know they're dead.
So it's can be just trying to help them realize that they need to take that next step in the process.
Right, and once that's done and they have that idea of this has happened, then I open up a doorway for them to move on, and then they move on from that point. And that's really important to do.
Have there been any, is there any one in particular significant experience you remember helping somebody move forward?
I think I had a year where, and I don't know why this happened, but I had thousands of children that were outside the gates here because we have this charge that nothing can come in unless it's invited. So I had to bring them all in and open up the doorway for them to go out. And often they're scared, so you have to have this conversation with them first. And then often manifest in some way or another the people that are waiting so they can not be scared, and then we'll walk through, and sometimes you just have to help them through. There were so many, and they and having to hold them and to assure them, that was very emotional.
Were they all from around the same periods of time, or was it from just anybody that had gotten stuck apparently got drawn to you that year?
Yeah, it was all different time frames, and
wow.
And I don't know why that happened that way, but it did, and that was probably that's probably a more significant year. Often people don't stick around. The process is that most of the time I notice that people stick around through till their burial or whatever, usually a week or so. Sometimes the process will look a little different according to what the emotional state is of the person that they've left behind. But generally, they go then, and then they process. There is a space they have to kind of go through. It's like a walk from this reality to the next one. Sometimes people get stuck in that in-between time, and sometimes they'll see it as where they expect it to be, like, hey, I want to be on a beach in Florida, and I want to have a cabana boy or whatever that might be bringing me drinks. Maybe that's where you go. Sometimes people that are more conscious can actually see that process going through there. But then they go to the next place, which is where they need to be. And it is iridescent. Like, I don't know how many of your listeners have seen What Dreams May Come.
Oh, I love that movie.
But the colors that were there, that's what the first place looks like. And that's where you process your lack of being human anymore. And so there's people there to greet you, help you, almost like therapy time, help you release a lot of being human in that place. And there's lots of other places, but again, that's another time we could talk about what happens after you die.
It's interesting, the parallels and the processes when you start thinking about, in Christianity, purgatory isn't necessarily a bad place, but it's, a processing place. It's an in-between kind of place. Or the one that really hit me was Buddhist concept of bardo, where you have to go in and do the work to get to those next places as well before your next incarnation in their particular belief.
Right, and that's also through this process as well. It goes into different rooms to different levels. Now, one of the most, I think the hardest part is when people commit suicide.
Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, when people commit suicide, if you can imagine in their minds where their own personal hell, and we'll use that word.
That's hell on earth to be able to commit that act, I would assume.
Right, but the pain that they're in and what they imagine things are is what they create after they die. So they're basically petrified in a place of their worst making. And they stay there often, and they can't get out. It's a level that's really dark. And now when I have to go in and pull people out of that, it's a dangerous place because the energy, there are things guarding that space that do not want them to leave. I mean, everything survives on different type of food, and there they survive on their pain and the energy made from it. So when I have to go down there, I have to be very, very stealth, walking through and try to mask my light and become more invisible. Then I have to get the person out of their own trance. So I have to get them to focus on me. And then if I can get them to break out of that I can then grab them and get them and pull them out of that space and help them then with the process of going to the first level.
Interesting. Made me think of Dante's Inferno, getting into those deeper levels where you're guarded with those other creatures, and you're actually having to try and bring them back up, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, because my experiences in there is, they will devour you if they can. I mean, energetically, you can just be left. It's a very dangerous place to go unless you have some experience with working in that realm or others. So it's not for the faint-hearted for sure, but I think that to be left in that realm is hard. And like I had a nephew that committed suicide a few years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
On Christmas Eve. And his mom and I don't talk very often, but she got in contact with me and she said, "You promised me if anything ever happened that you would be here." And so I went in and got him out, and I was really happy I was able to do that. And she was in grief for, as you can imagine, for a long time.
I can imagine it still rears its head now and again.
Oh, absolutely. But you see this shawl right here?
Yes.
It's the only thing she's made, and she said that was my gratitude shawl for saving her son.
It's beautiful.
It is. It talks about the layer of light and love and the intensity of emotion of it, and so that all eyes can be seen and created through the web of beauty.
I love that. So you've helped many people, it sounds like. Is there anything that has stood out this year for you?
Oh, this has been a complicated year. There's so much more pain. And this is when I've been really glad I live out in the country, because the pain is overwhelming. I've had to put a lot more protection up because of that. I think this year, the emotions that have been really running high is fear and hate.
I can imagine that stoking the fires with the loneliness as well, being trapped in your own, and most people being locked in their houses, not having as much contact, and that fear of the unknown, what's next.
Well, I think it's the fear of knowing themselves. Right?
Tell me more.
So if you're in a place by yourself, often you have, and people can only watch so much Netflix.
Eventually they get tired.
Right. And they're in a place, if you're in a room by yourself and you can only see yourself. And look, most people don't want to look at their shadow places on the inside and do that personal work.
Most people don't do the work ever.
They don't, but it's really necessary. But as you go forward with that, if you're caught in a place with yourself, then you have to look at that more. You have to recognize the pain you're in. And usually we live such busy lives outside of that you have a limited amount of time that you have to be faced with it. There's that quietness of sleep. But the rest of it tends to be busy. But whenever we have been captured inside of our own homes, there's too much quietness. There's too much ability to have to look inward. And that's not, people are not liking what they see. And so if you don't want to do the work on yourself and look at your own shadows, your own pain, then it's better to look outward at others and to stroke it less. How can we get the most amount of emotions? And there's been a lot of people supporting people, but how did that look if they supported themselves? What would that look like? Raise ourselves up as human beings, not as labels of anything else, but nurture yourself, love yourself. Let's start there. Let's start with that own love. Let's look at all the reasons why we could and we should.
But that's the hardest part.
It is. But it is the best part. We're all here to do work. And it's not like, making somebody else money. That's not the deep work while we're here. The deep work is all inside of this heart, this body. This is all the deep work. It's all the choices you've made in your life. And look, the consequences of your own actions are inside of you. So if you don't like it, stop making stupid choices.
I have a friend that I've been getting on his case a little bit about, he's so worried about these things that seem out of his control that he won't make the little changes that are within his control. And trying to encourage that action, just make those little steps and you'll see the changes that are possible.
Yeah, and that's really important because people get paralyzed by fear. And it's easy to be manipulated with fear because it's one of the biggest shadows that people have is being fearful of a plethora of things. And, you just have to be touched and activated just the right way and you'll just go off. But how about if that didn't work anymore? How about if we woke up and we didn't have that issue? And this year, I challenge people to wake up to their own love, their own self-love, to their own power, instead of allowing someone else to push your buttons and let fear lead the way. Let love lead the way. Because that's a critical message, not only from me to you, but also from your ancestors to you, that you are love. That's what you were made up of. And that's what they want you to continue with, to hold that torch higher than they could.
I have an experience that I don't talk about a whole lot that apparently I'm weirdly going to share right now, where I was in the middle of a conversation in my kitchen shortly before all hell broke loose for me, and I ended up inside prison. And I was enveloped in just pure white light, feeling an indescribable feeling of feelings. The closest word was love. And I knew that I could stay here and I would be happy, for lack of a better term. I would be enveloped in that love, but that my work wasn't necessarily done and I had to come back and I had to figure that out. That was actually probably the catalyst for me to dive deeper into my spirituality and figure out what all of this was. So is there something that you would correlate to that on your side from the pagan beliefs?
Well, I think my catalyst was my oldest son.
Really?
I didn't have the best childhood, and even though I was very gifted in many ways, that didn't mean that I made good choices for myself. I absolutely lived in my fear and my pain, and totally in chaos. So whenever I found out I was pregnant with him, I realized that I was bringing in a life that I had to be responsible for, that my choices were going to create his life. And if I didn't make good ones for myself, then I could create a beautiful life that I think he deserved. So he was absolutely, I felt pain for the first time. I was in such an emotional deadening of self that I couldn't feel pain anymore. And so often I'll say on his birthday, I am grateful this day to feel pain. Because those labor pains, those were big. But I felt them, and I celebrated feeling them because it meant I was alive. And if I was alive, I could love, and I could change, and I could be more. And I could not be a victim of the circumstances, but I could choose to create my circumstances. And so I went forward to making all the changes that were necessary, and to know that beyond the fact of knowing that I was here to do something, but I had to now put that into play. I couldn't hide behind everything else. So my oldest son absolutely was my catalyst to make sure his life was what it needed to be. It was all out of love. It was this blooming, the seed of love that was put in my heart from my ancestors for the divine that was not watered and not nurtured until I gave birth to him.
That's beautiful.
And it bloomed.
So as we're getting closer to Halloween or Samhain, and we're getting ready to build those altars and things for our families, is there something that you would like to pass on, something that you could share with us on how to do that more efficiently? You said food, favorite items, things like that. Is there things that go into it?
Oh, absolutely. Now, this is my tradition, and I'll speak from that. People have different ones, I'm sure. But all when my boys were little and up to now, we would choose different people that we wanted to highlight. I'd have a name of list of people I wanted to talk about, do research on them so I could tell their stories. And we would build our altar together as a family. And so from the choices of the colors, which usually was like black and red.
Any significance in the color choices for you?
For me, the black is the point of darkness, of loss, but not loss celebrated in sadness, but just still loss. And the red was always a signifier of blood, blood of my blood, bone of my bone, my ancestors, that layer, and also of that love. And so those are why we usually choose that. But people could also, we've chosen white as well to go over it. And sometimes that would be like a lace that would go over the black. So it's the layering, the light and dark aspects of it. And then we would choose, I have crystal balls that I put on it. I have different stones that I add in. But these are, and I choose those because they're points of power within it, charging that emotional intention of that space. I usually choose a few ancestor pictures, people I personally know. Like I have my grandmother and my uncle. I have some friends that have died, a few things like that. I also have a separate one because I get most of my animals cremated. I have an altar for the pets that are lost, and so it's the altar of lost pets to honor those. And
they're
I have
still
pictures.
Family for sure.
They are, and we would always put candles on it. I have tea lights, so every night when we would tell the story, we would first light a tea light, and then the story would start, and the pictures and the sharing. But it was a way of teaching the children about their ancestors, and sometimes it'll go back, oh, well, you do this, so you kind of see where you might have gotten some of it from. We have food. I usually use red roses myself, and I keep them there, and I usually keep them on for a couple of weeks. We'll start ahead with the roses, and then if the roses die, we just make them petals, and they absorb all of that energy, and then they dry, and then I use them in sacred work. Later, that work with the ancestors, so all of their energy and power is also within that. I utilize items such as one of my ancestors fought for Scotland, and they have these little hats that they used to wear, and so I have that out. That's an item. It could be rings, anything. So I put things like that out, and we talk about the different items. Each item you put there should have a significance to you. It can be a small altar, it can be a big altar, but it has to be intentional. It has to matter, because that's what you're building. You're not building a Hollywood-style altar, but it can be quite beautiful. I put candelabras on mine and use different colors of candles, and they burn over that each night, and it's really beautiful. And each tea light, again, has a significance, and I try to find black tea lights when I light them. It's hard to find except this time of year, so I stock up. So I have some for other times, and so I speak to them and I spend time with them, just their presence for that night. Whoever we're remembering is with us.
So when it comes to personal altars, intentionality is definitely a key component then.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think with everything that you do, being intentional with it is absolutely necessary. So build it from your heart. Build it with things that matter. If you have one ancestor you want to you want to honor, that's fine. Build an altar just for them. And it doesn't have to be those colors. It can be like strictly for them. Like maybe they like tie-dye. Well, put that tie-dye down, It doesn't have to be. It's not about what other people perceive the color should be. You're building it to honor those people.
It's about their
that's what's important. Yes, it's about their importance. And so that's what the focus should be on.
You'd mentioned stones, crystals. Are there any in particular that have meaning for you, or that would have meaning energetically for people to put on an altar like that?
Those were open questions because I'm a stone healer, and I use stones to heal people, but I heal stones too. So that's a whole different thing. So generally I use quartz crystals because they're clear as far as the energy moving through, and they amplify. So that's primarily why I utilize those. Sometimes I'll use a grounding like a tourmaline and something that's got the softer energy to help it ground it in space in that place. Sometimes it's important to, according to who you're honoring, if you know them or that's important that you know them and know their energy. But for people that may not be as familiar with the person, then having that grounding stone in front and set that when you light the candle, and with the intention that they return to where they came at the end, so it helps ground that energy out after a set time. I mean, if you're not me and you can say, "Excuse me, it's time for you to go on home now," you don't want to have a lot of people hanging around.
Like I know for my grandfather, who's an important figure in my life, he always had a black onyx ring. And I remember that very vividly, and that's something where I would think about putting something like that out if I were to honor him. Would that have anything other than the personal meaning for me behind it? Would there be bringing any other energy or anything into that?
Oh, well, absolutely it would, but the most important ones are your memories.
Okay.
Because it's you just by you saying that, I can see all of this emotion and all of these times throughout your life and what it meant to you. That's the stories you tell.
So that energy actually would override the natural energy because of the intentions and everything else behind it?
Well, I think it would just dance with it.
Complement it.
Exactly, complement it. So, yeah, and onyx is a really soft, natural grounding energy. And evidently, he was probably very grounded, down-to-earth sort of individual.
Very
or
much.
maybe had his times when he was up, but maybe that onyx kept him, like, sane and down.
Most of the time.
So, and you can certainly use stones in your everyday wear to help you with different issues that you're facing. And so that certainly would mellow that out. That would be a good grounding piece that would kind of complement everything else that was happening.
Well, as we're getting a little bit longer into this, was there anything else you wanted to share about Halloween or traditions that we've carried over?
Well, one of the things I really want to talk about is what a witch is.
Oh, please.
Because a lot of people have this idea that we're doing, all these negative things. And really, a witch is a nurturer. I work with herbs. I work with people, their emotions. I'm a healer. And this is what it's about. It's about being able to see the earth and the things that live upon it with the same importance, and being that healer and that a teacher. That's the focus of that. For instance, I'd like to kind of draw a few parallels. I think that should make it really clear. When we're sitting around, you have a group of men and women sitting around doing spell working, right? And they're going, "Oh my goodness, what are they going to do?" So parallel this. You have a group of men and women in a church in a circle, and they're going to be praying for someone's health, or, they're having challenges. Guess what? We're doing the same thing, different labels, but you're working for someone's health. You're working for someone's betterment. And it's that energy, that focus of intentional energy sent up to the divine. That is what it is. So the labels are different, but we're doing a lot of the same work. We're just very much connected to the earth and to the things and the energy around us, and we see the parallels of that, I think, more clearer.
So for me, I've always associated the prayer, that word, with also meditation being just different sides of the same coin, different ways of working with that energy. So it's interesting now to also put the spell work into that same frame of thought.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, all of these, they go together, and I think that's really important to realize and to understand that sometimes if you really ask and you find out what is happening, you'll get more of a clarity, and maybe it won't scare you so much. Remember, we're only scared of the unknown. You should never be scared of having questions. And yes, there are people that do naughty things, but let's see, they do naughty things regardless of what path they walk, being Christian, being Buddhist, being whatever they follow. There are people that do that, and it's not their path that they follow that caused that. It's the darkness within their own selves that will not allow the light in to show that love that's there. And so that's the problem. It's not what they're practicing.
And that's when it comes to like racism and things like that, I've always associated that same thing with that fear of the unknown. You don't know somebody, you've never had these interactions with them, so you put them in this category of fear, and so shedding light onto things like that is the only way to get rid of those fears and that limiting belief structure.
Oh yeah, and I think if anything, pagans tend to look at people not so much as colors. They just see them as energy, as human beings.
That's how I was taught as well. Yeah. Everybody's human.
Everybody's human, yeah.
There are assholes in every size, shape, and color, but there's also great people in every size, shape, and color.
Right. I always say I don't care what color you are. I care what your character is about. Like, that's what matters. Character matters, and I don't care about the rest of it.
I love it.
I don't care who you sleep with. I don't care any of that. That's your life. That's your choices. But, your character matters to me. So, and I think that should be the same for so many people, and to not limit themselves to their own fears, but try to rise above it.
Well, I know you've got this big event planned for Saturday. What else is coming up? What are the next events you're working on?
Yule. Yule is always fun. It's kind of like the equivalent of, we have it on winter solstice, which is the shortest day, longest night. And
my grandpa was born on the 21st, and he always said that God blessed him with the most hours of the day to drink.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, so that is the next one I'm working up on, and I think there's a lot of great information about how that's practiced. And so, yeah, I that's another one of my favorites. When we gift not in the idea of commercialism, but in small tokens of gratitude.
I like that.
Yeah, lots of stories about sacrifice. I really focus on the ideal of giving birth and the things that mothers do. What they give birth to is pain and birth sorrow and birth love. And all of this is done at the end. You get this process of this new light that's being born. But this new light is what nourishes us and keeps us, and nothing is gained without something sacrificed.
And that always reminds me in the Christian tradition, where technically celebrating the birth of Jesus, but you see all of the Virgin Mary imagery coming out. You like Michelangelo's Pieta. You see all these images of the mother and the son. It's not just that; it's about the creation as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's super important. And of course, there's lots of other things on that one. We talk about the noble virtues and how we can incorporate it in our lives and how to be better people. And so these are all gifts as well that we give to ourselves, but also others that are in our lives.
Well, like I said, we're getting closer to the end here, so I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but we normally have this section where I talk about exploring passions, and you've done that for pretty much the whole section here, and I really appreciate it. But with that, being a medium, is there anything that you've seen that I've brought in with me today? Is there anything that you would want to share?
As far as what you brought, I don't see anybody with you today.
Okay.
And the rest, I think, is a little personal of the different things that are going on with your lives right now. But, you've got a lot of transitions and change happening. And I think with all of us, having that honesty and transparency with ourselves is super important. And sometimes lifting the veil of truth is something that you're working on.
Okay.
And so I think that's going to be continuing into the future. I see a lot of beautiful light and layers of kindness in you, and that these are things that are really important for you to go out and I think really to teach and to let people know, I think, the truth in the matter. You're illuminating the knowledge about things that perhaps people did not fully understand. And so you are definitely an illuminator of things in this world. And you should definitely continue down that path, because illuminating mystery does not make it less, but it makes the person live a fuller life of deep understanding of what's behind the veil. And that's something I think that's important for you to go forward. But also to stand in your own power of self. And to get a really good foundation of who you are and what your goals are and how to meet those. Because often we can get excited about what we want to do without having all the steps in place. And so going out prematurely can sometimes cause us not to be as successful as we need to. So I think you need to really make sure all the steps you have that you're going to be taking the next part of your life are really firm and in place, and to make sure to sit with the energy for a while and see with the wisdom that comes through.
I
think those are the biggest parts. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's good advice.
Absolutely.
I'm actually very much relevant as I'm working on a lot of that right now, and even with this podcast, that's one of my main goals is giving a voice to people and letting people be heard, and hopefully spread that around.
And that's so important. Yeah. And it's, the voice of everyone is important, but often we only hear people that are more well-known, politicians or actors, actresses, or people that are more commercial. But having people in real life being heard, there's so much wisdom out there. So
everybody has a story. Everybody has a voice and a history. And yes, I believe that too.
Yeah, I'm a big one on stories. I have such a passion for them. So I'm right there with you.
I really appreciate you sharing yours with us today too, or at least part of it. I want to come back for more.
Absolutely.
Well, we're at the moment of vulnerability part of our podcast. And my first question in there is normally, what motivates you in life?
Oh, what motivates me? I want to be a catalyst for change for others in their lives. It is absolutely that. It's what I'm here to do. I'm here to teach people about unconditional love and to awaken them. I want them to see who they are and to remember why they're here. That's it.
I love it. Is there anything that scares you?
Let's see. I would say what would scare me would be if people did not awaken and they moved towards annihilation. Because being forgotten as a species is the ultimate act of death.
I don't think that I've seen that hold you back at this point. Is there, what keeps you moving past that fear and trying to help people? What brings you to that point?
Well, it does not hold me back. None of that holds me back, because that is what I'm hoping that people move towards a different direction. So The only thing that really holds me back some now is my mobility issues. That's difficult. But life has changed, so I just know what my limits are and keep moving forward.
I think that the fact that we are so connected now with the web and everything else definitely helps be able to get the word out even through those things. Do you find that you use that to connect?
I'm trying to do that more for sure.
Really?
I am. I have a website, and I'm trying to get my school online. And by getting my school online, I'm hoping to reach more people. And there's a lot more to it. I'm not as technically minded as I'd like to be. I wish I had all the answers for that to make that work for me, and unfortunately I don't. And I don't have an endless pocketbook of, several $1,000s to have people build it. So I'm muddling through the best that I can. But I'm gifted in having a lot of people that are very good at what they do. So.
Oh, that's good to hear. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me or Sean know. I would like to help out.
Oh, I will never say no to that.
Is there a game-changing moment in your life? You shared the birth of your son. Is there anything else that really propelled you in a different direction?
I can't really think of another one other than he was that catalyst for change. I think with my son was the biggest one in my life. And I think that's probably just being connected, I think, to the divine and being honored with the point of making hard decisions, sometimes the decisions you don't want to make, and following through with what you need to do rather than what you want to do, and seeing what the results are. Those always are layers of affirmation that I'm doing the right thing. I think those are certainly small catalysts in my life as I go forward.
Okay. And is there anyone that you consider truly influential in your life?
I have been blessed with meeting a lot of different people and having the opportunity to hear people's stories, hear their struggles. I think having that position, that honor of being and helping other people in their lives, weaves a layer of trust, of importance. And I weave that with all of the different mentors that I've had and friends that I have that open themselves and make themselves available to me if I have questions or thoughts. So it's the importance of just seeing the possibilities and having, I guess, this whole group, the community of people that are available to you. But the greatest thing is whenever you're able to see the change and helping someone else. That's it's a catalyst, but it's also an honoring, to see that sadness lift.
It's a gift that you can't describe.
It is. There is no description for that. And I sometimes I don't feel like it's me at all. I feel like the divine speaks through me. And I'm just I'm a way for ancestors and other ones to converse with the ones that are here. And that work is so life-changing for others. They all are mentors for me of love.
Are you familiar with Edgar Cayce at all?
I am.
He, in his readings, they talk about, this life being so much work that we're processing through. We're having to learn all of these lessons that we incorporate through our next lives. It really seems like this is helping you as well by helping others, and you can see that beaming through you, and I'm really happy to see that you feel so fulfilled.
I do. It makes me very happy to do that. And just that point of having lessons to learn as we move forward. I wanted to kind of touch on a moment about your experience when you were younger and felt like you had died and then had a choice of coming back. I've often had that feeling of what it's like to be detached. And it's so hard to say yes to the day.
Yeah.
And there were times, and there have been times, not because of that suicidal thing, but so missing that and so being happy when this life is over and I've done what I need to do just to get back to that. It's indescribable. That feeling, that point of grace, the lightness, and then it's like being hooked up to this collection of billions of this pure little lights of love. And I miss it. I really miss it. But I'm honored to be here this time. It's what I came to do. There are many of us that sacrificed to come back. And to be here to help people move and shift during this time. And I'm really honored to be able to do that. But that doesn't mean I don't miss the other. But it's worth it. I trust that people can grow in their own selves and to go and evolve and shift to this next consciousness level.
Well, I, for one, am very grateful to have you here helping out.
You are so welcome. Yeah.
Is there any personal philosophy on life you'd like to share?
That even if you are in the darkest moment in your life where there seems to be nothing around you, that you seem to be surrounded in total black, that there's always a point of light within that darkness, and then everything starts with a seed. So plant your seeds so they can bloom. But when you plant them, you have to nourish them, because nothing will grow in a place of darkness. It has to have light. And so feed and nourish yourself like the plant and become what you already are.
Remember that you have to be the light as well.
Yes, you have to be. You have to be love. You have to awaken. You have to know. Remember why you are here.
Well, do you have any final words or shout-outs you'd like to say for anybody out here?
Well, I am so happy to be able to be here today and to talk to all of you. And if you ever need any of my services, please look me up on Facebook at elwinherman.com. I also have Elwin Herman Medicine Woman. And I also run Sacred Spiral Sanctuary out here, and that could be something that could interest you. And my website is elwinherman.com, and I offer all my services there. And I would love to meet and to talk to any of you out there and to keep spreading and weaving that love and joy. So I hope you all have a great Samhain, and remember your ancestors. Remember the love, because that's what matters.
Thank you again so much. It's a beautiful message to share. We're so grateful to have you, and I hope to have you back again.
I absolutely look forward to it, and I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your week.
Thank you again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I want to give a special thanks to all of our listeners. You are the reason I'm doing this. Please tell your friends about us and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And I know every podcast says that, but it's because it really does help spread the word and visibility. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. Thanks again, and have a blessed day.